The Illinois country gradually dissolved into the somewhat indistinguishable Ohio country and Northwest Territory. The Ohio country became core of an otherwise greatly unorganized U.S. region in 1783 with the end of the Revolutionary War and the Treaty of Paris. Several colonial states had conflicting claims to portions of it, including Connecticut, Virginia, New York, and Pennsylvania. In 1787, however, those states' claims were largely extinguished by the Northwest Ordinance, and the lands became part of the larger Northwest Territory. Most of the former area north and west of the Ohio River 16 years later became the state of Ohio in 1803. In the 17th century, Algonquin-speaking Shawnee and some Sciowan language-speaking tribes lived north of the Ohio River. Around 1660, during a conflict known as the Beaver Wars, the Iroquois seized control, driving out the Shawnee and groups like the Omaha and Ponca, who then settled further northwest and west. The Iroquois conquered and absorbed even the Erie, who also spoke an Iroquoian language. The Ohio country, like the more eastern and northern Adirondacks, remained largely uninhabited, though, for decades, and was used primarily as a hunting ground for the Iroquois. Native American groups in the 1700s began to migrate in increasing numbers to the Ohio country from the east, driven by encroaching colonists. Delaware Indians, or otherwise known as Lenape, established the village of Kittanning, 1724, northeast of current Pittsburgh, on the Allegheny River in present-day western Pennsylvania. Scattered Shawnee tribes struggled to keep their villages intact, but were dispersed by their Iroquois neighbors. Some Seneca, the westernmost Iroquois group in New York, had slipped away, though, into Ohio from the French and British rivalry south of Lake Ontario. In 1749, the British Crown, via the Colonial Government of Virginia, granted the Ohio Company most of the Northwestern Territory on condition that it be settled by British colonists. However, both Great Britain and France claimed the area. Worse, the Iroquois League claimed the region by right of conquest. This three-way rivalry for control presaged the French and Indian War. Some of George Washington's own relatives were among the grantees of acres on the upper Ohio. Their charter was granted on grounds that they would build a fort on the river and settle 100 families within 7 years. In 1750, Christopher Gist, a fur trader, was sent by the company to explore as far as the Falls of the Ohio, the site of Louisville today. Over a period of 1 year, he explored an area that now includes Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. A trading center was built at Wills Creek, where Cumberland, Maryland now reposes, and a trail blazed to the junction of Redstone Creek and the Monongahela. The Kittening Path marked the later Cumberland Pike, the first federal road in the U.S., or otherwise called the National Road. The Cumberland Trail extended a wagon route also known as Braddock's Road and the Nemacolin Trail. This was an ancient Native American path that crossed the Allegheny Mountains barrier via the Cumberland Narrows mountain pass, linking the watersheds of the Potomac River and the Monongahela River. The Indian pathway began at Cumberland, Maryland, and ended near Brownsville, Pennsylvania. During 1749 and 1750, the Delaware Indian chief Nemacolin and Maryland frontiersman Thomas Cresap did some fix-up of the trail for the Ohio Company with the support of Christopher Gist. In 1755, during the French and Indian War, English General Edward Braddock used the eastern part of Nemacolin's trail as a military route in his ill-fated attempt to capture Fort Duquesne, held by the French, later Pittsburgh. The French took countermeasures to offset British expansion policies. Céloron de Bienville led an expedition from Lake Erie to Chautauqua Lake and proceeded south to the Allegheny River. His troop proclaimed French sovereignty, nailed to a tree a sheet of tin bearing the arms of France, and buried a leaden plate stating that land along the Ohio and its tributaries belonged to the King of France. The last of many plates was buried at the Great Miami River near the French fort post at Maumee, Ohio. Marquis Duquesne sent an expedition in 1753 with more than 1,500 men to formally occupy the Ohio country. Fort Presqu'île was erected, as was Fort Le Boeuf at French Creek. After initially remaining neutral, some Ohio Indians accepted French supplies and guns, then raided via the Kittanning Path against British settlers east of the Alleghenies. After they destroyed Fort Granville in the summer of 1756, the colonial governor John Penn ordered Lieutenant Colonel John Armstrong to destroy the Shawnee villages west of the Alleghenies. Meanwhile, other British and colonial forces finally drove the French from Fort Duquesne and built Fort Pitt, the origin of the city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In an attempt to improve relations with the Indians and to encourage trade and avoid conflicts with colonists, George III, in his royal proclamation of 1763, ending the French and Indian War, had combined all the Ohio country into what was declared as Indian Reserve, stretching from the Appalachian Mountains west to the Mississippi River and from as far north as Newfoundland to Florida. The British ordered the existing settlers, mostly French at that time, either to leave or obtain special permission to stay, and prohibited British colonists from settling west of the Appalachians. The Crown no longer recognized claims that the colonies, filling now with revolutionaries, made on this territory, and in 1774 the British Parliament passed the Quebec Act, annexing the region to the province of Quebec. Colonists in the 13 colonies considered this one of the intolerable acts passed by Parliament and another incitement that led to the American Revolution.